in terms of this philosophy called the divine play or the cosmic game, that's game over.
Right.
Right? Like the divine created you and you forgot. And the divine is kind of there, in my vision, benignly cheering you on, not intervening so much as saying, come on, I'm over here, come on, I'm over here, look over here, look over here, look over here. And then when you get it, and there's this incredible mystical reunion, it's game over for you in a good way. You've solved the puzzle. You've solved the riddle of life,
yes,
right?
Yes.
And then kind of the next challenge is, well, how do you live that? Which is
yes,
is an interesting second question.
right.
So it helps people find where they are a little bit on those state. They understand that their own struggles and their own suffering and their own curiosity and their own revelations are all part of this much bigger process.
Welcome to Letting Go and the Greatest Secret, where we explore the end of your suffering and the beginning of lasting happiness. I'm Hale Dwoskin. What if whatever is happening in your life is part of God's plan for you and what is? This perspective can be very liberating and uplifting. In our discussion today with Martin Boroson, we explore Marty's unique perspective on this and how it relates to your life and what is happening in the world for all of us now. Martin Boroson is the author of Becoming Me, the award-winning mystical creation story coined by scientists, psychologists, and leaders of many different faiths. Born in New York, Marty studied Western philosophy at Yale, followed by private study of Eastern philosophy and the work of C.G. Jung. He earned an MBA from the Yale School of Management and trained in transpersonal psychology with Dr. Stanislav Grof. He is a psychotherapist, executive coach, and a Zen priest. Marty is also the author of One Moment Meditation, Stillness for People on the Go. So tell me just a little about yourself and how you started teaching the way you do.
How I started teaching, what a great question. So I would say that I was actively on a spiritual or therapeutic search from a pretty young age, always feeling there was something more, something that behind the surface of things that I kind of wasn't being told or wasn't being shown, but was there. I had that, or something I had to get to, or something wasn't right. Sometimes it was very positive, like I need this, I want this. And sometimes it was a feeling of things aren't right, I'm not okay until I get there. And it really made me quite I guess, ferocious in trying to find the way to there. And I would also say that as I did that, and my motivation was for self, but I always had a little voice in me saying, everything that I learned, the little voice said, how could I explain this to people? How could I, write about this? How could I use this to help? So I guess that's a kind of teacher impulse.
Yes.
So I own that it was primarily for my own interest that I was doing things, but I always had that little sense of, how can I explain this? What am I learning here that could be of value to people?
Sure. And so what did you discover from your search?
I suppose it very much went in stages for me. First, I'm very, very heady, analytic guy by nature. And the first big discovery was that I couldn't get there through thinking. I did a lot through thinking, a lot of self-analysis and kind of jnana yoga, but I kind of got to a point where you don't get any further with thinking. And discovered body and body psychotherapy and body awareness. And that was a huge opening for me, because there was a lot going on in my body that I didn't know about. So my body and the pain in my body was an extraordinary teacher. And that began many years of exploring pain, physical pain, and the emotional pain that went with it. And a lot of my work then became through, I was very influenced by a teacher named Stanislav Grof,
Yes.
who's one of the founders of LSD, psychotherapy, transpersonal psychology. And when I met Stan, he was primarily teaching a technique he called holotropic breath work.
Yes.
So
I'm
that
very
became my
familiar.
main practice. And for years of practicing holotropic breath work, it was pretty much unrelenting pain and horror and suffering. Like I was really digging deep into a kind of interminable amount of pain, and then began a whole series of breakthroughs through that. One kind of mystical realization or awareness bigger than the next in quite rapid succession.
Yes.
And so it's very much it would be the revelation of those experiences that I would like, that I teach from now, but also combined with my understanding of how hard the process can be for a long time for many people. It doesn't, for many of us, it doesn't just happen overnight or easily. So I have a great, I care about helping people who are very stuck along the way.
Yes, yes. And so this is more, so what would you say the inner state is now? Or you're talking about process. And yes, there's certainly, when you describe the story of our lives, it's all about the process. Where do we think we are now, and how do we get here? So if you put all that aside, what's left over?
Beautiful question. The words that came into my mind, isn't there a children's film or book called Sunny with a Chance of Meatballs?
I haven't.
Something. I think that, I don't know how that right, but it's a good title.
No, I think
yeah. The way I would describe it is, when you're in a very cloudy day, which we have a lot here in the UK.
Yes.
And then you get on a plane and suddenly you're through the clouds and it's really sunny above the clouds.
Yes.
And the realization is that it's actually, unless it's nighttime, it's always sunny above the clouds. But when we're below the clouds, we don't really see the sunny.
Yes.
And so I would say that the enduring state for me is never forgetting that it's sunny, even when there are clouds. But there still are clouds.
Okay, good.
So life throws up new challenges. Life throws up new problems. Life throws up new ways to learn that you're not finished yet. And yet there's the kind of constant or almost constant connection with the field that's holding that's sunny.
Good. Tell us a little bit about your book and its message. And,
sure.
and what's the name of the books, just so everyone knows?
It's called Becoming Me. Yes. And that's not me. The me in that title is not me. It's you and everyone. So it's a mystical story of creation told from the divine point of view. So it's very much source becoming me. And I'll explain that a bit more.
Yes, I know what you're pointing to, absolutely. But yes, please do explain it.
Sure. I mean, it probably should have been called Becoming You, or just Becoming, or just Being. I'll give you a little bit of the background.
I like the last one.
Yeah, it was a bit of a compromise with the publisher. So a little bit about the background to the story, because I think that says a lot in and of itself.
Oh, absolutely.
So at the absolute climax of this series of mystical openings, I had an experience that, could be called non-dual, or could be called the experience of everything as vibration, or no separation between what we think of as the divine and what we think of as the immanent or the world.
Yes.
And it completely reformed me. I definitely felt that at a cellular level, I was being changed by this experience. But in the kind of wake of that experience, in a very quiet moment while I was meditating or praying, I heard a voice, and it wasn't like a disembodied voice, but it was definitely didn't feel like my voice. And it had a very soft, wise, warm, loving, almost childlike tone. And it said exactly the following: once upon a time, I was. Once upon a time, I was.
Mm-hmm.
And I went, huh. That's the beginning of the form of a children's story.
Yes, yes.
Could I possibly tell the philosophy of what's called the divine play, that the divine creates the entire universe from within itself as a form of play, with the purpose of the play, well, there are many purposes, but one of them is to have someone to play with. Because if everything is divine, if everything is the absolute, there is no other.
Right.
So the divine has to create the appearance of another from within itself in order to have a relationship, right? And it's, for the divine, this is great fun. And what we are in this theory, or this realization, is like bits of the divine that have forgotten that we're divine,
Mm-hmm.
right? Could I tell that whole story, that whole philosophy, in the form of a children's book? I never thought of it as a children's book. I thought of it in the form of a children's book. And of course, there's a huge, lovely kind of paradox in that first line, once upon a time I was. So, because fairy tales, when they start with once upon a time, they don't mean a long time ago. They mean in another reality, right? In a place beyond time and space. That's what kind of once upon a time means. We're going into another realm here.
Yes.
And of course, if it's really the divine's voice saying this, there's no before or after. There's no I was. There's just I am. The divine is and is and is and is and is and is and is.
Yes.
But in
So
order
it's
to have a
not upon
story,
time, even.
exactly, and
Yeah.
there's no past. But in order to have a story, you need time. You need a narrative, a beginning, middle, and end.
Yes.
So the playful paradox that was built into that first line that I was given was that the real meaning of it is beyond time and space, I am. Beyond time and space, I am. And that is reality. But if you're going to express it as a story, you've got to tweak it a little bit. And this intelligence, whatever this voice was, tweaked it to say, once upon a time, I was. And then the question becomes, what happens next?
Right.
Why does the absolute, who's eternal, blissful, infinite, need to do anything at all? And that's what the story is. And then who are we, and where do we find ourselves in that story, and how do we find our way back? Is the game. So I had this idea. That's a long way around telling you the story of the story. I had this idea, and I thought, this is nuts. Like, I could never sell this. Like, this is too weird. And I put it away for about 4 years. And then suddenly I was working on another really big philosophy book that I never finished. And the need to finish this little book, which only has about 400 words in it, got so big that I couldn't resist it. And I finished it really quickly with ideas for illustrations, because it's very dependent on pictures. Sent it to a publisher, and we started working on it almost immediately. So that was the first step. Then I was really surprised, because I still thought nobody will, just a few kind of weirdos like me will understand this. But what was amazing when it was first published was that so many people from different religions loved it and said, this is what we believe. This is what we believe. Oh, this is what we believe. I thought, I never would have expected that people from so-called traditional religions would accept a story that's like this mystical. And because I didn't use any religious jargon, zero in the story, there was nothing in it to bump up against other people's jargon.
Right, right.
So I had like scientists, psychologists. It was amazing, because it was taught in Sunday schools and in sermons on the one hand. And on the other hand, it was taught in totally secular philosophy programs. because it just didn't have a category.
Yes, yes.
And so that was an amazing experience. That was about 20 years ago. Sort of, I suppose, a little bit, I don't know, it's well received. But then only recently I decided to reissue it as a little bit more like the way I imagined it visually, in terms of the images and the shape, and I felt the time was right for people to look at it again. So it's back in print.
Great, great. And so, what is the core message of the book?
So many.
What are the core messages then? I don't want to limit you to have to summarize it into.
Thank you. Maybe you can help me find the one big one. But, I think for many people, and why they often cry when they read it, is that they experience palpably the enormous love that's here for them all the time. That the force of the universe is love, and they are an expression of that love. And it makes it very palpable. One person said to me recently, I was giving a presentation at a conference, and she stood up and she said, "You have to get this to adopted children." And I said, "Why? I don't understand. Of course, everybody would love it, but why?" And she said, "Because they often have a question about their lineage, like where do they come from? What's their background?" And suddenly you're showing them that they come from God, and that they're wanted to, their existence was desired by the divine. So what an enormous comfort for a child who's adopted and doesn't know part of their genetic lineage to know there's actually a much bigger lineage, right? So I think from that point of view, the comfort of knowing that love exists and that it created us is palpable for people. So that's one core message. And then another message is, it really, life is an illusion, and you're an illusion, and I'm a beautiful illusion, and I'm an illusion, a beautiful illusion, and we take ourselves very seriously. And if we can just remember that it's all play and all an expression of the divine playing with the divine, then we can live a little bit more lightly with that understanding.
Yes, or a lot more lightly.
And the same thing for the trees and the animals. We're all perfect expressions of the divine play. So the book also helps people, I think, and this is why I say there's kind of many messages. It helps people find where they are on their own journey a little bit. Because there's that stage. So the book charts that process where we're born as divine, and then immediately we forget. We forget who we are. That's what enables us to live. It's not a bad thing, right? We forget that we're divine. And that means we can throw ourselves into the process of living as if it all totally matters and we hope we never die. And then, but that also sets up our suffering because we've forgotten that we're not divine, that we're divine, right? So the double-edged sword.
Yes, absolutely.
Sword maybe being the right word, because our memory is cut off, right?
Yes.
And then, so that's the first stage. It once for us. There's an earlier stage for the divine, but that's the first stage for us. And then, we go along in our life doing the best we can, learning what we're supposed to learn, whatever. And then at some point, Joseph Campbell called it the call to adventure. We go, there's something else here. Like, who am I really? Or we have problems like I did. And I said, something's not right. There's something else here. We get a glimmer. Maybe it's a synchronicity. We get those wake up moments. We go, there's something else going on here. Not quite what I was taught. Or we get an illness and we get scared of death, and that causes us to face certain things. So any number of things can wake us up. And then we're on this so-called spiritual journey where we're practicing and practicing, or doing this and doing that and doing that to try to understand. And there's stages of that journey too. There's stages of kind of great mystical opening and delight, and then we go back to where we were before. And then there's kind of the ultimate stage where we remember except we remember that we and the divine are not separate. We are an aspect of the divine. So there isn't really an us anymore. That's sometimes called ego death, because I can't have that experience, right? I can only, what's the best way to say this? In having that experience, I'm not me anymore. I've left
Right.
me.
Well,
Right?
that experience really is the absence of you.
Exactly. Yeah.
The
A big,
God
wonderful
or
experience of not me.
exactly. God or
Yeah.
beingness or everything and nothing is already this.
Yeah.
And the only within that there's this imaginary veil that says, no, I'm here, everything else is there, it's my life, I'm in charge, I'm doing it, and it's not
Mm-hmm.
really that way.
Exactly. So that's in terms of this philosophy called the divine play or the cosmic game, that's game over,
Right.
right? Like the divine created you and you forgot, and the divine is kind of there, in my vision, benignly cheering you on, not intervening so much as saying, come on, I'm over here, come on, I'm over here, look over here, look over here, look over here. And then when you get it, and there's this incredible mystical reunion, it's game over for you in a good way. You've solved the puzzle. You've solved the riddle of life,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And then kind of the next challenge is, well, how do you live that? Which is
Yes.
is an interesting second question. And then another, yeah.
Yeah, and
So
another
it helps
one.
people find where they are a little bit on those state. They understand that their own struggles and their own suffering and their own curiosity and their own revelations are all part of this much bigger process. It's actually, I would say it's actually architected, like there's clues embedded in the system for us to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
But if it were too easy, it wouldn't be fun.
I guess so. And so you have this book that kind of alerts people to this perspective. And do you actually work with people on this, or tell me a little bit about what's built up, if anything, around the book? Because you mentioned that you speak, but so what
Yes,
exactly?
yeah. Well, I'll be. I took a break from the book actually for many years because my sense was that it was, and this may have been a misunderstanding on my part, that it was too mystical for many of the people that I work with. That it was, people said it's lovely, but they didn't understand how it was related to their everyday lives. They didn't, or it was purely my own concern around its. I work a lot in the field of leadership and leadership coaching, and it was hard. And I started to integrate meditation into the corporate world. That was my second book, but that was already a difficult sell at the time.
Yes.
When I started doing this, and the book was called One Moment Meditation, and I was pretty radical at the time for saying you can meditate in a short period of time, but it was still a really hard sell in the workplace when I started doing that. The mystical thing, probably an even harder sell.
Yes.
And so I think I've changed, but also the world has changed. And I think actually now there's more and more leaders who will talk more openly about, if not mysticism, then spirituality or meaning as a part of life.
Yes.
20, 30 years ago, people didn't even talk about soul that much.
No.
So it was a kind of a dirty word.
Well, especially in the corporate environment, it was trying to be completely secular, because there were, and to a big degree it still is, because they don't want to step on any particular group's belief systems because they can be quite divergent.
Yes, that's one fear. I think the other fear is the fear of the non-rational.
Oh, definitely.
So I think there's been a lot of change. I think there's a huge opening now to alternative expressions of meaning.
Mm-hmm.
That's one thing that's changed. And the other thing that I've noticed is that leaders, everybody really, or many people, are hungry for what I would call higher levels of self.
Mm-hmm.
So like they've done personal development of various kinds, or therapy, for example, or had coaching or done various skills, including wonderful things like developing emotional intelligence, which is a pretty radical step on its own in the
Yes,
corporate world,
absolutely.
or not just in the corporate world, for everybody. But then some people say, what else is there? What's next? There's this feeling is starting to emerge of there's something next.
Yes.
One of my clients calls it, can we develop superpowers? Or
Right.
I would just say that if you look at development vertically, we just become aware that we've gotten to this level and there's a few more levels above us. So
Yes.
if you're on a developmental journey that's taken you to here, then you start to get a little inclination that there's here. For those on audio, I've just raised my hand so that
Right.
and then there's here,
Right.
and then there's here. So you start to, as you go up, you get a taste that there might be more.
Yes.
And so I would call mystical now just those higher levels of development.
Yes.
And I think more and more people are getting kind of glimmers and being pulled to that. So the time is really right for me anyway, to talk about it more explicitly, kind of come out of the closet with this.
Right. Well, I don't think it's just happening for you. I think it's happening all over the planet.
Mm-hmm.
There's an acceleration in the external contraction and strife, but there's also a vast acceleration in people being both within the corporate world and in the general populace to non-linear thinking and just being open to direct experience and that which is beyond experiencing, that which just is.
I agree with you. And I think there's two kind of sociological factors that are kind of happening at the same time that are really interesting. One is the rebirth of the interest in psychedelics with very strong, credible scientific backing for its therapeutic value for trauma.
Yes.
That's a huge change. And that's going to have a huge impact, not just on the people who are being healed, but on the way we think about things. And the other thing that I think is having huge impact is really people getting what diversity might mean and what it might mean. And I've seen this a lot in the corporate world, white, straight men, for example, really starting to question how are they genuinely listening or treating people who are different from them. And we have a long way to go on that, but I've seen a shift. And I think you can't make that shift without having a change of consciousness. It's like something about your worldview this is why it's so hard for people to make this shift, is because something about your typical ego structure has to kind of shift or fall apart or
melt
in order to really do that.
Yes. Yes.
So that makes some space for some other ways of thinking to come in. We're not kind of just seeing things the way we have in the kind of Western world, for the official kind of Western world, for a long time.
Yes. Because again, I don't know if you know much about what the Sedona method is or work, but it's more. There has to be a dissolving, at least in what I've seen, a dissolving of the old paradigm, both within our own personal experience and within society, before the new paradigm can be born, because the old paradigm is a self-reinforcing loop.
Exactly.
It only allows in what reinforces it, and it ignores or rejects or fights against anything that could be contrary to that. And that's on every level. And we're doing that even with our supposed problems. We're fighting to protect them rather than recognizing that, wait a minute, this is just a way we're seeing it, a way of knowing the world through a filter
Mhm.
And it's when the filters drop away that
Mhm.
life is revealed as this.
Mhm. How do you see it when you're working with people in that way? Do you see a lot of fear come up when they're at that
Yes,
threshold?
sometimes there can be a lot of fear. There could be resistance. There could be um, rejection of an alternative message like that, and there also could be a sense of resonance, a sense of openness, a sense of,
Mhm.
oh,
Mhm.
yeah, I can feel that. I resonate with that.
Mhm.
That feels like the right direction. There's always both.
It kind of the image I had when you were speaking, which was like, if it's a threshold, right? Like, do you have one foot on the other side, or just a toe on the other side, or no feet on the other side? Because if you got a little one foot on the other side, then you can taste that this is going to be a good thing, even if you have fear.
Yeah,
But if you don't know anything about it, it's just terrifying.
right. But again, the I guess you could say it's a leap of faith, but not you're believing in something. You're willing to suspend for a moment
Mhm.
the need to operate from belief, and it's not you doing it. It can just spontaneously suspend.
Absolutely.
For some of us, it just disappears, and then there's no longer a struggle. But for
Right.
most of us, it gets suspended because the sense of me has subsided or disappeared, at least temporarily. And then this that already is recognized or revealed.
Absolutely. Yeah. So to go back to the kind of why is this happening now? There's just one more thing I wanted to say is
Sure.
that, and this is, I think, one of the reasons why I'm coming out with this republication of Becoming Me now and teaching from it now, is that I actually believe that the problems, the challenges that we're facing in the world do require what we have typically called a mystical perspective in order to solve them. So the
Yes.
things that happen to us as we go through some sort of quote unquote mystical opening are the qualities that we need to solve the problems that we're facing.
Yes.
So it's a bit of an unfortunate box to have pushed them all into mysticism, and they consider that irrelevant and kind of airy fairy and unreal, when actually what's in that box is precisely what we need to solve these very real problems.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So it's time. It's
But
time.
maybe what'd you say? I didn't hear that.
It's time.
Yes. 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 Yeah. And again, maybe it isn't so much that it's mystical. It's just that it's actual. See, it's a funny misconception that most of us live in is that we think it's a mystical experience when all of a sudden we're not just lost in our drama or lost in politics or lost in the bottom line of the company. There for most of us, even if there's no seeking, spiritual in quotes, seeking going on, there are moments where all of that just drops away, revealing that it isn't the be all and the end all. There is just this that is actually already the essence of everything. That's very ordinary, yet um, uh, divine isn't the right word because that makes it mystic again.
Yeah.
But exquisitely beautiful.
Mhm.
Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. 100%. Yeah. It's almost, I think the yearning for the divine, as much as it can be an important part of the process for people, is also a kind of mistake, because in the yearning, we create the distance. It's a hard one. It's a challenging one to get over. One of those sacred paradoxes, but it's great to yearn for greater connection with the divine, and yet are we pushing it away by yearning for it
Yeah.
when it's already here?
Yes. Yes. Well, or is it only, another way of saying that, I'm agreeing with you, is that it's only the yearning that makes it appear as though it's there, as opposed to this that is already.
Yeah.
Good point.
So I mean, the reality is that it's all divine. There is
Yes.
no split.
Yes. And it's all ordinary. Exactly. There's no difference.
Yeah. One of my favorite quotes is from Shinryu Suzuki. You probably know it. He said something like, everything is perfect just as it is, and there's considerable room for improvement.
Great.
It's beautiful. I mean, it's true, and what I love about that is it expresses that sort of ultimate realization is the perfection of all things, including our pain and suffering.
Yes,
Hard
including
to
all of
get
it.
that.
Yes.
And within that, there's something okay about trying and striving, and kind of, that's why we teach, is to help. There's something within that that attracts us to improving it. But boy, does it help if we're still aware that it's perfect as it is.
Oh, yeah, it's critical. Without that,
It's like
it's an endless struggle.
if I'm working with a client, right? They're coming with a problem, right?
Yes.
And I would be remiss if I didn't help them solve their problem. And yet, paradoxically, the only way I can help them solve the problem is if I totally accept them as they are. With compassion and love.
Yes.
And that's the first step that enables the change to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to honor that they're coming with a problem, but I can't buy into the problem in the same way they are.
Right. Well, you see them, there's a natural seeing of them as the perfection, even as the problem appears to be presenting.
Yeah, and that's a beautiful teaching that I've only realized recently from becoming me. I'm still learning about it. I still recite the text. It's the best spiritual practice for me. But one of the things I learned recently was in a conflict that I was having. I suddenly, with another person, I suddenly switched and I said, why did God choose to be that person with that perspective? Like, there's value there. That person is advocating a perspective I in this kind of ego role am disagreeing with.
Mm-hmm.
But if I switch to my God self, these two people, including Marty, are each here for a reason, to have a conversation, to have this difference of opinion, which is interesting. And I'm as allied with their perspective as I am with my perspective.
Yes.
I was it actually completely changed. I'm not sure you're not surprised, that particular conflict.
Of course.
I suddenly became their champion in their argument with me.
Yes. That can
and
happen.
all the tension eased out.
Yes.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
It's a really beautiful practice. Yeah.
Yes.
It's very easy too. I mean,
yes.
Once you kind of get it, it's just step back and say, why did God choose to be that person with that perspective? Interesting.
Yes.
What are they defending? What's their need? What problem are they trying to solve in their journey?
Yes. That's beautiful. Thank you. So, is there anything else that you want to share with the audience? with everyone who's listening and
Um,
watching?
Thank you for asking. I hope that what I've said is clear, and if it isn't, they're welcome to get in touch with me.
Great. And how would people get in touch with you?
Numerous websites. I think if they started becomingme.com, they can see the short animated version of Becoming Me, which is beautifully set to music by Bobby McFerrin. And that would give them a kind of 4 or 5 minute meditative experience of the story. So that's right there on the becomingme.com website or on YouTube. And that's a great way for them to experience what this is about, because I can't convey it in my words alone.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Martin Boroson. You can learn more about Marty at martinboroson.com. That's MartinBoroson.com. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe so you have immediate access to future episodes. Please give us a 5-star rating and share it with the people you care about. If you'd like to learn more about my work, my mentor, Lester Levenson's work, and the Sedona method, please visit www.sedona.com. As you explore our site, you'll learn the key to lasting happiness, success, peace, and emotional well-being. We have books, courses, events, and plenty of free material to explore. Again, go to sedona.com. That's sedona.com. Thank you for being here, and we'll catch you on the next episode of Letting Go and the Greatest Secret.